The 1970s weren't just about disco and bell-bottoms. Television was taking wilder risks than ever before, and most of them crashed and burned spectacularly. While everyone remembers the hits like Happy Days and All in the Family, the decade was littered with ambitious failures, bizarre experiments, and shows so ahead of their time that audiences just weren't ready. What if I told you some of television's most creative disasters happened during this groovy decade? Get ready to discover 20 forgotten gems that dared to be different but couldn't survive past their freshman year. Turn on 1969-1970. What happens when you try to outshock the most controversial show on television? You get Turn On, a psychedelic nightmare that made Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In look like Sunday school. This experimental variety show from producer George Schlatter was television's first genuine disaster, getting canceled after just one episode when viewers and advertisers fled in absolute horror. Turn On was pure sensory overload, flashing lights, rapid-fire jokes, sexual innuendos, and computer-generated graphics that looked like a bad acid trip. The show featured no host, no regular cast, just a stream of consciousness comedy that jumped between sketches faster than channel surfing on steroids. Tim Conway was the only recognizable face in the premiere episode, and even he seemed confused by what was happening around him. The controversy was immediate and brutal. Within minutes of the February 5, 1969 premiere, phone lines at ABC affiliates were jammed with outraged viewers. Several stations actually stopped broadcasting the show mid-episode, replacing it with dead air rather than continuing the madness. The Denver affiliate famously pulled the plug after just 10 minutes, declaring the show in poor taste and not suitable for family viewing. What made Turn On so shocking wasn't just its content, but its complete abandonment of traditional television structure. There were no commercial breaks built into the format, forcing stations to awkwardly cut away from the chaos. The show's computer-age aesthetic felt alien and threatening to 1969 audiences who were still adjusting to color television. By the next morning, Turn On was dead, making it television history as the fastest cancellation ever. The remaining 12 episodes were scrapped, and George Schlatter went back to his successful Laugh-In formula. Turn On became a cautionary tale about pushing boundaries too far, too fast, proving that sometimes being ahead of your time means being completely alone. Supertrain 1979. Picture this: a luxury train traveling across America with more drama than a soap opera and a budget that could have funded a small country's space program. That was Supertrain, NBC's $10 million gamble that became television's most expensive train wreck of the 1970s. This wasn't just any train. Supertrain was a nuclear-powered, double-decker marvel complete with swimming pools, shopping centers, discos, and even a gym. Each week, celebrity guests would board this rolling palace for adventures that mixed Love Boat romance with disaster movie thrills. The train itself was the star, a technological wonder that was supposed to represent America's bright future. The production was as excessive as the premise. NBC built an actual 31-car train set that cost more than most movies, complete with hydraulic systems that could simulate realistic train movement. The network was so confident they ordered 24 episodes before filming a single scene, betting that audiences would fall in love with luxury travel in the age of airline deregulation. But Supertrain derailed almost immediately. The scripts were weak, the acting was wooden, and the train effects looked cheaper than they actually were. Worse, the show aired opposite established hits like The Dukes of Hazzard, making it dead on arrival in the ratings. Critics savaged it as an expensive disaster that proved money couldn't buy creative success. The behind-the-scenes drama was more entertaining than anything on screen. Budget overruns were legendary, with reports of the train set breaking down during filming, causing expensive delays. The show's creator, Dan Curtis, clashed constantly with NBC executives who kept demanding changes to justify their massive investment. After just 4 months, Supertrain reached the end of the line. NBC lost millions and learned a painful lesson about throwing money at problems. The show became a cautionary tale about Hollywood excess, proving that sometimes the most ambitious dreams become the most spectacular failures. Pink Lady and Jeff 1980. What do you get when you combine Japan's biggest pop duo with an American comedian who doesn't speak Japanese? Television's most bizarre cultural experiment, Pink Lady and Jeff, a variety show so awkward it made cultural fusion look like cultural confusion. Pink Lady, Me, and Kay were superstars in Japan, selling millions of records and packing stadiums with their synchronized dance moves and catchy pop songs. When they crossed over to America in 1979 with Kiss in the Dark, NBC saw dollar signs and immediately greenlit a primetime variety show, pairing them with comedian Jeff Altman as their translator and comic foil. The concept was doomed from the start. Pink Lady spoke virtually no English, relying on phonetic pronunciation for their dialogue and songs. Jeff Altman had to carry the comedy burden while serving as a cultural bridge, but the language barrier created more confusion than comedy. Watching the show felt like observing an elaborate game of charades where nobody knew the rules. The production values were surprisingly high, with elaborate sets, professional choreography, and A-list guest stars, including Sid Caesar, Alice Cooper, and Donny Osmond. Pink Lady's performances were visually stunning, with costumes and staging that rivaled any major variety show. But the magic that made them stars in Japan couldn't translate through the cultural divide. American audiences were baffled by the show's surreal tone. Sketches would shift between English and Japanese without warning, leaving viewers feeling like they were watching television from another planet. Critics were merciless, with one reviewer calling it the most incomprehensible hour on television. The show lasted just 6 episodes before NBC pulled the plug. Pink Lady returned to Japan as bigger stars than ever, their American adventure becoming part of their legend. Jeff Altman disappeared into television obscurity, and Pink Lady and Jeff became a reminder that some cultural gaps are too wide for even the most ambitious television show to bridge. The Nancy Walker Show, 1976. Nancy Walker was television royalty, the scene-stealing maid on Macmillan and Wife, and the hilariously sarcastic neighbor on Rhoda. So when she got her own sitcom, everyone expected comedy gold. Instead, they got The Nancy Walker Show, a confused mess that proved even the most talented performers can't save a show that doesn't know what it wants to be. Walker played Nancy Kittredge, a former Navy lieutenant turned talent agent in Hollywood. The premise had potential, a tough, no-nonsense woman navigating the entertainment industry while raising her family. But the show couldn't decide if it wanted to be a workplace comedy, a family sitcom, or a vehicle for Walker's sharp-tongued wit. The supporting cast was solid, featuring Ken Olfsen as her long-suffering husband, and James Cromwell in an early TV role as her business partner. But the scripts were wildly inconsistent, jumping between broad physical comedy and sophisticated entertainment industry satire without finding a consistent tone. One episode might feature Walker doing pratfalls, while the next would have her delivering cutting commentary on Hollywood phoniness. Behind the scenes, the show suffered from creative chaos. Multiple writers and producers came and went during the brief run, each trying to find the magic formula that would make Walker's acerbic personality work in a sitcom format. The network kept demanding changes, making the show feel more like a work in progress than a finished product. The timing was particularly unfortunate. Walker was at the height of her popularity, making memorable appearances in commercials for Bounty paper towels while starring on 2 successful shows. Audiences expected her signature wit and timing, but The Nancy Walker Show delivered a watered-down version that pleased nobody. After just 13 episodes, the show was quietly canceled. Walker returned to her supporting roles, where her talent could shine without carrying an entire series. The failure proved that star power alone couldn't overcome weak writing and confused direction, making The Nancy Walker Show a masterclass in how to waste exceptional talent. Quark, 1977-1978. In a decade obsessed with Star Wars and space exploration, Quark dared to ask, what if the future was just as bureaucratic and ridiculous as the present? This space comedy from Get Smart creator Buck Henry was brilliantly subversive, turning science fiction into a workplace sitcom that was decades ahead of its time. Richard Benjamin starred as Adam Quark, commander of a garbage collection ship in the year 2226. While other shows depicted space as a realm of noble exploration and cosmic adventure, Quark revealed it as a mundane workplace filled with petty regulations, incompetent supervisors, and mind-numbing routine. Quark's mission wasn't to explore strange new worlds. It was to collect space trash and deal with the United Galaxy Sanitation Patrol's endless bureaucracy. The supporting cast was perfectly cast for Henry's satirical vision. Tim Thomerson played Gene, a transmute with both male and female characteristics, who served as the ship's science officer. Conrad Janis was the perpetually frustrated supervisor Otto Palindrome, constantly berating Quark from his space station office. The ship's crew included Betty and Betty, identical twin androids who couldn't understand human emotion, and Ficus, a plant-like alien whose logical observations highlighted humanity's absurdities. The show's humor was sophisticated and weird, lampooning everything from corporate culture to space opera conventions. Episodes featured bizarre scenarios like a planet populated entirely by cowboys, a space monster that turned out to be misunderstood, and bureaucratic mix-ups that nearly destroyed entire solar systems. The special effects were deliberately cheap, emphasizing that this was comedy first, science fiction second. Critics loved Quark's intelligence and originality, but audiences weren't ready for such a cynical take on the future. The show aired opposite established hits and struggled to find viewers who understood its unique brand of humor. NBC kept moving the show around the schedule, making it impossible for fans to find. After just 8 episodes spread across several months, Quark was canceled. The show's influence lived on, inspiring later workplace comedies and satirical science fiction. Buck Henry had created something genuinely original, but like many brilliant ideas, it was simply too strange for its time. Holmes and Yo-Yo, 1976. What happens when you cross Sherlock Holmes with the $6 Million Man and throw in some Three's Company-style slapstick? You get Holmes and Yo-Yo, a buddy cop comedy so bizarre it made robot partners seem normal while somehow making them completely unbelievable. The premise was pure 1970s high-concept television. Detective Alexander Holmes, by Richard B. Shull, gets partnered with Gregory Yo-Yo Yoyanovich, played by John Szysznyk, who's actually an android police officer so advanced that only Holmes knows his true identity. Each week, they'd solve crimes while Holmes tried to keep Yo-Yo's mechanical nature secret from their fellow officers and criminals alike. The show's comedy came from the culture clash between Holmes's old-school detective work and Yo-Yo's computerized efficiency. Yo-Yo could analyze evidence instantly, had superhuman strength, and never needed sleep, but he couldn't understand human emotions or social cues. This led to endless misunderstandings, where Yo-Yo would take everything literally, creating chaos while trying to help. What made Holmes and Yo-Yo particularly strange was its commitment to the secret identity premise. Rather than embracing Yo-Yo's robotic nature for broad science fiction comedy, the show kept it hidden, forcing the humor to come from near misses and close calls. Yo-Yo would malfunction at crucial moments, spark when he got wet, or start reciting computer code when stressed, while Holmes frantically covered for him. The writing was surprisingly clever at times, playing with audience expectations about what androids could and couldn't do. Yo-Yo wasn't a perfect machine. He had glitches, personality quirks, and an endearing naivety that made him more human than many human characters on television. But the show's fatal flaw was its inability to commit to either comedy or crime fighting. The mysteries were too simplistic for adult viewers, but the humor was too sophisticated for children. ABC couldn't figure out how to market a show about a robot cop who had to pretend not to be a robot. After just 13 episodes, Holmes and Yo-Yo were deactivated. The show became a footnote in television history, remembered mainly for its weird premise and the chemistry between Shull and Szysznyk, who made the impossible partnership somehow believable. The Super 1972, long before the Jeffersons moved on up, there was The Super, a groundbreaking sitcom that dared to tackle urban housing issues through the lens of an Italian-American superintendent trying to maintain a crumbling New York apartment building. It was All in the Family meets Sanford and Son, with a social conscience that made audiences uncomfortable. Richard Castellano, fresh off his success in The Godfather, starred as Joe Girelli, a working-class super dealing with broken pipes, demanding tenants, and a slumlord owner who cared more about profits than people. The show's creator, James Comack, wanted to explore the reality of urban decay through comedy, showing how regular people survived in a system designed to exploit them. The supporting cast represented New York's melting pot: Black, Hispanic, elderly, and young tenants, who all depended on Joe to keep their building livable. Each episode dealt with real issues like rent strikes, building code violations, and the struggle between community solidarity and individual survival. This wasn't the Brady Bunch. It was television's first honest look at how most Americans actually lived. What made The Super revolutionary was its refusal to sanitize poverty or urban problems. When the heat broke in winter, tenants actually suffered. When the elevator stopped working, elderly residents were trapped in their apartments. The show found humor in these situations without mocking the people who endured them, creating a unique blend of social commentary and genuine laughs. The performances were naturalistic and gritty, especially Castellano's portrayal of Joe as a man caught between his tenant's needs and his boss's demands. The writing tackled subjects other sitcoms avoided: racism, classism, and the daily humiliations of being poor in America. But the super was too real for 1972 television audiences. Viewers wanted escapism, not reminders of their own struggles or social problems they preferred to ignore. Despite critical praise and award recognition, the show couldn't find an audience willing to laugh at such serious subjects. CBS canceled the super after just one season, but its influence was enormous. The show paved the way for other socially conscious sitcoms and proved that television comedy could address serious subjects without losing its humanity. The Kalliks, 1977. What if the Beverly Hillbillies moved to the city but nobody found them charming? That was The Kalliks, a working-class sitcom that tried to mine comedy from poverty and cultural dislocation, but ended up creating television's most depressing family comedy. The show followed the Kalliks family, based on the infamous early 20th century eugenics study that supposedly proved genetic inferiority in poor families as they moved from rural Appalachia to suburban California. Instead of fish-out-of-water humor, the Kalliks offered a grim portrait of a family struggling with unemployment, cultural prejudice, and social isolation. David Huddleston played Jasper Kallikak, a well-meaning patriarch who couldn't find steady work and didn't understand why his mountain values weren't appreciated in modern society. His family included a wife who longed to return home, teenagers embarrassed by their background, and extended family members who provided more problems than solutions. The show's attempt at humor often felt mean-spirited rather than affectionate. While the Beverly Hillbillies celebrated rural wisdom triumphing over urban sophistication, the Kalliks seemed to mock both rural poverty and suburban pretensions without finding redeeming qualities in either. Episodes dealt with unemployment, discrimination, and family dysfunction in ways that were more tragic than comic. Behind the scenes, there were constant battles over the show's tone and direction. Writers couldn't decide whether to embrace the family's outsider status or help them assimilate, leading to scripts that felt confused and contradictory. The performances were strong, but the material gave the actors nothing to work with. Critics savaged the Kalliks as classist and exploitative, arguing that it perpetuated negative stereotypes about rural Americans while offering no genuine insight into poverty or cultural displacement. Audiences found the show too depressing for comedy, but too superficial for drama. NBC pulled the plug after just 5 episodes, making the Kalliks one of the shortest-lived sitcoms in television history. The show became a cautionary tale about the difference between laughing with characters and laughing at them, proving that social commentary requires empathy as well as humor. Chopper 1, 1974. In the wake of Emergency and Adam 12, every network wanted their own heroic first responders series. ABC's entry was Chopper 1, a police helicopter show that promised high-flying action, but delivered low-flying ratings and even lower production values. The series followed officers Don Burdick, a.k.a. Jim McMullen, and Gil Foley, a.k.a. Dirk Benedict, as they patrolled Los Angeles from their helicopter, responding to crimes and emergencies from the air. Each episode featured car chases, rescues, and aerial surveillance that were supposed to showcase the excitement of modern police work from a bird's-eye view. The concept had potential. Helicopters were still relatively new in police work, and aerial footage could provide spectacular action sequences. The show's opening credits promised excitement with shots of the helicopter swooping over LA while dramatic music played, but the execution was severely limited by budget constraints and technical challenges. Most episodes featured the same handful of aerial shots recycled endlessly, with the helicopter appearing to circle the same few blocks repeatedly. The radio conversations between the chopper crew and ground units became repetitive, and the crimes they investigated were surprisingly mundane for a show promising high-flying adventure. Dirk Benedict, who would later find fame in Battlestar Galactica and the A-Team, showed star potential even in this limited format. His chemistry with McMullen was the show's strongest element, creating a believable partnership between two cops who trusted each other with their lives every day. But Chopper 1 couldn't overcome its fundamental problems: limited locations, repetitive action, and scripts that failed to take advantage of the unique aerial perspective. The show felt more like a cheap imitation of successful police dramas than something genuinely different. Critics dismissed it as Atom 12 in the air, without the character development or realistic procedures that made that show successful. Viewers quickly lost interest in watching the same helicopter shots week after week, and ratings plummeted quickly. After just 13 episodes, Chopper 1 made its final landing. The show proved that high-concept premises need more than a gimmick to succeed, and that aerial action is only exciting when it serves compelling stories about interesting characters. The San Pedro Beach Bums, 1977. What if Gilligan's Island took place on the California coast with young studs instead of castaways? That was the San Pedro Beach Bums, a sun-soaked comedy about 5 guys living on a houseboat and pursuing the eternal California dream of surfing, partying, and avoiding responsibility. The show followed Christopher Murney's buddy, Stuff, Stuart Pankin, John Mark Robinson's Dancer, Daryl McCullough's Moose, and Krista Rose's Boy Chick as they lived the beach bum lifestyle in the LA harbor. These weren't rich kids playing poor. They were genuinely struggling to survive while maintaining their laid-back lifestyle and surfing whenever possible. Each episode featured the guys getting involved in various money-making schemes, romantic entanglements, and minor adventures around the marina. The humor came from their clash between idealistic beach culture and the harsh realities of 1970s economics. They wanted to be free spirits, but they still needed food, rent money, and gas for their van. What made the San Pedro Beach Bums different from other youth-oriented comedies was its authentic feel for California beach culture. The show was filmed on location at the actual San Pedro Marina, giving it a realistic backdrop that felt like a documentary about alternative lifestyles. The characters spoke and acted like real beach bums, not Hollywood versions of counterculture. The cast had genuine chemistry, feeling like a real group of friends who happened to be on television. Their adventures were small-scale and believable, not saving the world or getting rich, but just trying to enjoy life while figuring out how to pay for it. This modest approach was both the show's strength and weakness. Critics praised the show's authentic feel and likable characters, but audiences weren't interested in watching people struggle financially during a recession. The beach bum lifestyle looked more appealing in movies than on weekly television, where the characters' lack of ambition became frustrating rather than charming. ABC canceled the show after 1 season, but the San Pedro Beach Bums gained a cult following in reruns. It became a time capsule of 1970s California youth culture, capturing a moment when dropping out still seemed like a viable lifestyle choice. The Tony Randall Show, 1976-1978. After 5 successful seasons as Felix Unger on The Odd Couple, Tony Randall wanted to prove he could carry a series on his own terms. The Tony Randall Show was his chance to showcase his dramatic range while maintaining his gift for comedy, creating a unique blend that was part Mary Tyler Moore Show, part character study. Randall played Walter Franklin, a widowed judge in Philadelphia, trying to balance his judicial duties with raising 2 young children. The show's premise allowed Randall to explore both comedy and pathos, dealing with serious courtroom cases while navigating the challenges of single parenthood in ways that felt emotionally honest. The supporting cast was exceptional, featuring Alan Ann McCleary as his loyal secretary, Janet Rubner, and Devon Scott as his teenage daughter, Roberta. The show tackled contemporary issues through Walter's courtroom, addressing everything from domestic violence to drug addiction with a sensitivity rare in 1970s television. What set the Tony Randall Show apart was its willingness to let comedy emerge from character rather than forcing jokes into every situation. Randall's performance was nuanced and mature, showing a man trying to maintain dignity and compassion in a system that often rewarded neither. His relationship with his children felt genuine, avoiding the cutesy parent-child dynamics common in family sitcoms. The show's courtroom scenes were particularly well written, showing how the law affected real people's lives rather than focusing on legal technicalities. Walter's decisions often carried emotional weight, making viewers care about the outcomes in ways that pure legal dramas couldn't achieve. Despite critical acclaim and strong performances, the Tony Randall Show struggled against established hits and audience expectations. Viewers who loved Randall as Felix Unger weren't sure what to make of his more serious, dramatic work, while new audiences took time to discover the show's unique qualities. After 2 seasons and 44 episodes, the show was canceled. But it proved that Tony Randall was more than a gifted comic actor. He was a performer capable of creating complex, sympathetic characters that transcended genre boundaries. The show remains one of television's most successful attempts to blend comedy and drama in a family setting. Future Cop 1977. In an era when science fiction was exploding in popularity thanks to Star Wars and Close Encounters, Future Cop tried to bring robots into the police procedural format with mixed results. The show paired veteran detective Joe Cleaver, aka Ernest Borgnine, with Officer John Haven, played by Michael Shannon, an android police officer who looked human but possessed superhuman abilities. The premise was essentially Holmes and Yo-Yo with a bigger budget and more serious tone. Haven could analyze evidence instantly, had perfect memory recall, and never got tired or emotional. But unlike other robot characters, Haven was designed to pass for human, creating tension between his artificial nature and his increasingly human responses to police work. Ernest Borgnine brought his usual gruff charm to Detective Cleaver, an old-school cop who initially resented his mechanical partner but gradually developed genuine affection for him. The chemistry between Borgnine and Shannon made their unlikely partnership believable, creating emotional stakes that elevated the show above its high-concept premise. The show's strength was its willingness to explore what made someone human. Haven struggled with concepts like intuition, compassion, and moral ambiguity, things that couldn't be programmed but were essential for effective police work. Episodes often dealt with Haven learning to trust his developing instincts, while Cleaver learned that logic and emotion weren't mutually exclusive. Production values were impressive for television science fiction, with Haven's abilities demonstrated through practical effects and careful stunt work rather than obvious special effects. The show looked and felt like a real police drama that happened to feature an android character, not a science fiction show pretending to be about cops. But Future Cops suffered from the same problems that plagued many high-concept shows. Audiences weren't sure what genre they were watching. Science fiction fans wanted more futuristic elements, while police drama viewers found the robot angle distracting from the crime-solving they expected. After just 8 episodes plus a 2-hour pilot, Future Cop was canceled. The show proved that even well-executed concepts couldn't overcome audience confusion about what they were supposed to be watching, and that mixing genres successfully required more than just combining popular elements. Ball 4, 1976. Based on Jim Bouton's controversial baseball memoir, Ball 4 promised to show professional sports as they really were, not heroic or glamorous, but populated by flawed, complicated people doing a job. This sports sitcom was revolutionary in its honesty, but perhaps too realistic for audiences who preferred their athletics sanitized. The show followed the Washington Americans, a fictional baseball team filled with has-beens, wannabes, and misfits trying to survive in the big leagues. Jim Bouton played Jim Barton, an aging pitcher based on his own experiences, surrounded by teammates who were more interested in chasing women and paychecks than winning games. What made Ball 4 groundbreaking was its refusal to mythologize professional athletics. Players popped pills, cheated on wives, and treated baseball as a business rather than America's pastime. The show depicted the sport's casual racism, financial exploitation, and juvenile behavior without judgment or sentimentality. The humor was darker and more cynical than typical sports comedy. Instead of lovable underdogs triumphing against odds, Ball 4 showed mediocre players accepting their limitations while trying to squeeze a few more years out of their careers. It was a workplace comedy that happened to be set in professional sports. Jim Bouton's performance was naturalistic and believable, drawing on his real experiences to create an authentic portrayal of a player past his prime. The supporting cast captured the diverse personalities found in any professional locker room, some genuinely talented, others hanging on through connections or luck. Critics praised the show's honesty and sophisticated writing, but baseball fans were offended by its irreverent treatment of their beloved sport. The show aired during baseball season, but couldn't find viewers who wanted their sports entertainment to be so realistic and unglamorous. CBS canceled Ball 4 after just 5 episodes, but its influence was significant. The show paved the way for more realistic sports programming and proved that television could handle controversial subjects if the writing was strong enough. It remained ahead of its time, anticipating later shows that would examine professional athletics more critically. The Lorenzo Music Show 1976. Lorenzo Music was everywhere in the 1970s. The voice of Garfield, writer for The Mary Tyler Moore Show, and half of the comedy duo behind numerous variety show appearances. His own sitcom should have been a guaranteed success, but the Lorenzo Music Show proved that talent behind the camera doesn't always translate to success in front of it. The show was a meta-comedy about Lorenzo Music trying to create a television variety show while dealing with network executives, temperamental guests, and his own creative ambitions. It was a show within a show format that allowed Music to comment on the television industry while showcasing his musical and comedic talents. Music's gentle, laid-back persona was perfect for the character he played, a creative type frustrated by commercial demands, but too nice to really fight the system. The supporting cast included Denny Evans as his harried producer and various guest stars playing exaggerated versions of themselves. The show's humor was sophisticated and self-referential, poking fun at television conventions and industry practices. Music's background as a writer showed in the clever dialogue and satirical observations about how television actually got made. It was insider humor that revealed the absurdities of show business. But the Lorenzo Music Show's problem was its limited appeal. The inside jokes were lost on viewers who didn't work in television, while the gentle satire wasn't broad enough for audiences expecting typical variety show entertainment. Music's low-key performance style didn't translate well to carrying an entire show. The format was also confusing. Was it a variety show, a sitcom, or a documentary? Different episodes tried different approaches, making it difficult for viewers to know what to expect from week to week. The show lacked the consistency that successful television required. After just 13 episodes, the Lorenzo Music Show was canceled. Music returned to voice acting and writing, where his talents were better suited to the medium. The show became a footnote in television history, remembered mainly for its attempt to create something genuinely different in an era of formulaic programming. The Waverly Wonders 1978, what do you get when you combine the Bad News Bears with high school basketball and Joe Namath's legendary charisma? The Waverly Wonders, a sports sitcom that proved athletic success doesn't guarantee television stardom, even when you're dealing with lovable losers instead of champions. Joe Namath starred as Joe Casey, a former pro basketball player who becomes coach of the worst high school team in Wisconsin. The Waverly Wonders hadn't won a game in years, but Casey's job was to teach them basketball fundamentals while building their confidence and character. It was a classic underdog story with Namath's natural charm providing the star power. The team was perfectly cast, with young actors who looked like real high school students rather than Hollywood teenagers. Each player had a distinct personality: the class clown, the insecure benchwarmer, the hothead who fouled out every game. Their chemistry as a team felt authentic, making their losing streak genuinely sympathetic. Namath's performance was surprisingly effective, showing coaching skills that paralleled his real-life leadership abilities. He understood how to motivate young players and build team unity, translating his football experience into believable basketball coaching. His interactions with the players felt natural and unforced. The show's basketball sequences were well choreographed and realistic, avoiding the over-the-top heroics common in sports entertainment. The Waverly Wonders actually looked like a terrible team learning to play better, not underdogs destined for championship glory. This realistic approach was both refreshing and commercially challenging. But the Waverly Wonders couldn't overcome fundamental problems with its premise. High school sports comedies had limited appeal, and audiences weren't interested in watching a team that kept losing games. The show needed more comedy to balance its sports elements, but adding laughs risked undermining the characters' dignity. NBC canceled the show after just 8 episodes. Namath returned to his broadcasting career, and the Waverly Wonders became another example of how difficult it is to create successful sports television that appeals to both fans and general audiences. America Tonight 1978. Before The Larry Sanders Show deconstructed late-night television, there was America Tonight, a brilliant satire that took fictional talk show host Barth Gimble from Fernwood Tonight and moved him to Los Angeles for a nationwide audience. It was social commentary disguised as entertainment, mocking both television and American culture with surgical precision. Martin Mull reprised his role as Barth Gimble, the supremely self-satisfied host who believed he was bringing sophistication to television while actually embodying everything wrong with media culture. Fred Willard returned as his loyal sidekick Ed Begley Jr., a man so desperate to please that he enabled Barth's worst tendencies while remaining completely oblivious to his own absurdity. The show's genius lay in its commitment to the illusion that this was a real talk show. Guests included both fictional characters and real celebrities playing exaggerated versions of themselves, creating a surreal blend of satire and reality that kept viewers guessing what was genuine and what was performance art. Each episode followed actual talk show format, opening monologue, celebrity interviews, musical guests, and product demonstrations, but everything was slightly off-kilter. Barth's questions revealed his narcissism and ignorance, while guests responded with either desperate self-promotion or barely concealed contempt for the entire process. The writing was sophisticated and multi-layered, working both as genuine entertainment and savage criticism of television culture. Viewers could laugh at the obvious jokes while appreciating the deeper commentary about celebrity worship, media manipulation, and the degradation of public discourse. But America Tonight was perhaps too clever for its own good. Many viewers didn't realize they were watching satire, taking Barth Gimble at face value as just another bad talk show host. Others found the satire too subtle, expecting broader comedy that clearly signaled its intentions. After just 65 episodes, America Tonight ended its run, but its influence on television comedy was enormous, inspiring later satirical shows and proving that television could successfully critique itself. The show remains a masterpiece of sustained comic performance and social commentary. Ned Beatty deserved his own sitcom. The character actor had stolen scenes in everything from Deliverance to Network, showing range and charisma that demanded starring roles. Szysznyk was his chance to headline a series, playing a working-class everyman with dignity and humor that made him genuinely likable despite his questionable choices. The show followed Nick Szysznyk, a former Marine who takes a job as playground supervisor at a community center in Washington, D.C. Nick was a blue-collar guy trying to make a difference in kids' lives while navigating bureaucratic red tape and his own complicated past. Beatty brought warmth and authenticity to the role, creating a character who was tough but caring. The supporting cast included Olivia Cole as Ms. Harrison, the center's no-nonsense administrator, and Susan Lanier as Nick's girlfriend Sandy. The show's strength was its realistic portrayal of urban community work. Nick wasn't a saint or a savior, just a guy doing his best to help kids while dealing with limited resources and institutional obstacles. What made Szysznyk special was its refusal to sentimentalize either poverty or public service. Nick's work was shown as genuinely difficult and often frustrating, but also meaningful and occasionally rewarding. The kids weren't cute stereotypes, but realistic urban youth with real problems that couldn't be solved in 30 minutes. Beatty's performance was the show's anchor, bringing depth and humanity to what could have been a thankless role. He made Nick's dedication believable without making him preachy, creating a character who inspired respect rather than pity. The show tackled serious subjects like youth violence and family dysfunction with sensitivity and intelligence, but Szysznyk suffered from being ahead of its time. Audiences in 1977 weren't ready for a sitcom about social work, and the show's realistic approach to urban problems made it feel more like a documentary than entertainment. CBS couldn't figure out how to market a show that was neither purely comedic nor dramatically heavy. After one season, Szysznyk was canceled, but Ned Beatty's performance proved he could carry a series with the right material. The show remains a forgotten gem that treated working-class characters with respect and dignity while addressing real social issues. Big Eddie, 1975. What happens when you take the star of the odd couple's biggest rival show and give him his own sitcom? You get Big Eddie, a working-class comedy that proved Sheldon Leonard could create compelling characters even when the premise was as simple as a guy trying to run a successful business while keeping his family together. Sheldon Leonard, who had spent decades as television's most prolific producer, stepped in front of the camera to play Eddie Smith, owner of the Big E Sports Arena, a combination restaurant, bar, and recreation center in Queens. Eddie was a former athlete-turned-businessman who treated his establishment like a community center for working-class New Yorkers. The show's appeal came from Leonard's natural charisma and his understanding of working-class family dynamics. Eddie wasn't trying to get rich or move up in society. He just wanted to provide a good service while supporting his wife Honey by Quinn Cummings and dealing with his eccentric staff and colorful customers. Each episode showcased the various personalities who made the Big E their second home: retired athletes, neighborhood characters, and regular folks looking for affordable entertainment. Leonard's directing background helped him create ensemble scenes that felt natural and unforced, making the sports arena feel like a real community gathering place. The supporting cast was excellent, particularly Sherry North as Eddie's wife Honey and Ralph Wilcox as Raymond McKenna, the arena's ambitious young manager. The chemistry between the regular characters made their workplace feel like an extended family, with conflicts that were resolved through understanding rather than dominance. What made Big Eddie unique was its celebration of modest success and community connection. Eddie wasn't trying to build an empire or escape his circumstances. He was content to provide a valuable service while maintaining his relationships and dignity. This contentment was both admirable and commercially challenging. CBS canceled Big Eddie after just 9 episodes, unable to find an audience for a show that celebrated stability over ambition. Leonard returned to producing, and the show became another example of television's difficulty in finding comedy and working-class contentment. Doc Elliot 974? Before Northern Exposure brought quirky small-town medicine to television, there was Doc Elliot, a gentle drama about a New York doctor who moves to rural Colorado and discovers that healing communities requires more than medical knowledge. It was Marcus Welby meets the Waltons, with authentic Western atmosphere and genuine respect for rural values. James Franciscus starred as Dr. Benjamin Elliot, a successful Manhattan physician who burns out on city medicine and takes over a practice in fictional Gideon, Colorado. The show followed his adjustment to small-town life while treating patients who became neighbors and dealing with medical challenges that required creativity rather than technology. What set Doc Elliot apart from other medical dramas was its focus on preventive medicine and community health. Doc didn't just treat symptoms, he addressed the social and economic factors that affected his patients' well-being. Episodes dealt with malnutrition, workplace safety, and mental health in ways that felt educational without being preachy. The supporting cast captured the authentic feel of a small Western town. Neva Patterson played Connie Eldridge, the local nurse who knew everyone's secrets and served as Doc's guide to community politics. Bo Hopkins was Sheriff Bill Maddox, a lawman who understood that keeping peace required more than enforcing laws. Franciscus brought intelligence and empathy to the title role, creating a character who was clearly urban but genuinely respectful of rural wisdom. His interactions with patients felt authentic, showing how good medicine required understanding people's lives as well as their symptoms. The show's medical scenes were realistic and well-researched. The Colorado locations were spectacular, giving the show a visual beauty that enhanced its themes about the healing power of nature and community. The writing consistently found drama in ordinary medical situations, making broken bones and childhood diseases feel significant without being melodramatic. But Doc Elliot struggled against more action-oriented medical shows and couldn't find viewers who appreciated its quieter approach to drama. ABC canceled the show after 1 season, but it proved that television could successfully blend medical drama with Western settings while maintaining respect for both genres. When Things Were Rotten, 1975. Mel Brooks was the king of movie parody, so his venture into television seemed like a guaranteed hit. When Things Were Rotten was his take on Robin Hood, bringing his signature blend of anachronistic humor, Jewish comedy, and physical slapstick to medieval England with mixed but memorable results. The show followed Robin Hood by Dick Gaudier and his merry men as they battled the Sheriff of Rottingham, played by Henry Pallis II, and Prince John by Ron Rifkin, through adventures that mixed traditional Robin Hood stories with Brooks' modern sensibilities. Every episode featured sword fights, castle intrigue, and rescue missions that were simultaneously exciting and ridiculous. Brooks' humor translated surprisingly well to television, with scripts that packed more jokes per minute than most variety shows. The anachronisms were intentional and hilarious. Medieval characters used modern slang, referenced contemporary politics, and dealt with bureaucratic problems that felt distinctly 1970s. Dick Gautier made an excellent Robin Hood, playing the role straight while surrounded by increasingly absurd situations. His earnest heroism provided a stable center for Brooks's chaotic humor, making the parody elements funnier by contrast. The supporting cast embraced the show's anarchic spirit, particularly Bernie Coppell as Alan Adale. The production values were impressive for a television comedy, with authentic-looking costumes and sets that made the medieval world believable even when the humor was completely anachronistic. The sword fighting was well choreographed and genuinely exciting, making the action sequences work as both adventure and comedy. But When Things Were Rotten faced the same problem that plagued many Mel Brooks projects. The humor was so specific and rapid-fire that it alienated viewers who didn't share Brooks' cultural references or comedic timing. The show was simultaneously too sophisticated and too silly for mass audiences. ABC canceled the show after just 13 episodes, but When Things Were Rotten developed a cult following in reruns. It proved that Mel Brooks's humor could work on television when given proper support, and it remains one of the most creative attempts to bring movie-style parody to weekly television. The 1970s proved that television's biggest risks often led to its most spectacular failures. But what failures they were! These 20 forgotten shows dared to be different in an era when being different meant being canceled, leaving behind a legacy of broken dreams and brilliant ideas that were simply too ahead of their time. From Robots Cops to medieval parodies, each of these shows tried to expand what television could be, even if audiences weren't ready to follow them into uncharted territory. Which of these lost gems deserves a reboot? And what does their failure tell us about the risks and rewards of creative ambition? The 1970s may be over, but the spirit of taking wild chances on impossible ideas lives on.